In today's episode, I will be discussing this past fashion week, influencers and celebrities on the runway, recession-core, and the revival of vintage fashion trends. This episode contains discussions of sexual assault that some viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion advised. Fashion designer Alexander Wang rose to prominence after starting his label in 2005. Wang graduated from Parsons School of Design and founded his namesake label shortly after. In 2012, he took over the role of creative director of Balenciaga after Nicolas Ghesquier. Alexander Wang made his New York Fashion Week comeback on February 8th with his pre-fall 2023 show titled Cupid's Door. Influencers such as Gabriette, Julia Fox, and Sydney Carlson walked the runway. This is Wang's second show after the sexual assault allegations, which surfaced in late 2020, and his first back at New York Fashion Week after his show in Los Angeles in 2022. Wang's comeback show in LA was open to the public and included celebrity models such as Amelia Gray Hamlin and Adriana Lima. Coming as no shock, the fashion industry continues to support and celebrate people regardless of the fact that they have over 11 sexual assault allegations. The show received a ton of media coverage, with Business of Fashion stating it as Wang's dreamy and romantic return to Fashion Week. After facing backlash, Business of Fashion chose to change the article name. Celebrity model Julia Fox faced a lot of criticism for modeling in Alexander Wang's show. In a now deleted viral TikTok comment, a commenter said, "Julia, doesn't walking for Alexander Wang go against everything you stand for?" Julia responded saying, "To be frank, I love cancel culture, but we do need to leave room for rehabilitation and for those who put in the work and heal and learn from their mistakes." I personally don't think there should be any room for rehabilitation for people who have sexually assaulted other people and who have not come forward and apologized or done anything to make them worthy of forgiveness and rehabilitation. I also find it super interesting how people are always so surprised when celebrities sell out or do things such as this. I know Julia has labeled herself as sort of a feminist and LGBTQ rights icon on the internet, and she makes a lot of sort of political content on her TikTok. I just find it super interesting how she likes to label herself as woke, but then will also sort of shy away from controversy and delete videos and delete people's comments when they're sort of calling her out. But also, I don't think this is surprising at all. Julia Fox famously premiered in a campaign for Alexander Wang in 2022 and faced backlash, but I think her reputation ultimately recovered. Also, post walking for Alexander Wang, she's been seen all throughout Fashion Week, and she's walked a few other shows, I believe. I think for someone like this, sort of all publicity is good publicity. But I do also find it interesting how she's gone super out of her way to sort of like label herself as like woke and relatable. She recently had that apartment tour that went super viral online where she was kind of like, "Oh guys, like I live in this small apartment. I'm just like you guys." A lot of other celebrities like Kylie Jenner and Rihanna have been seen wearing Alexander Wang, and Gabriette and Amelia Gray and a bunch of other models have also walked in his shows. But I think the difference between them and someone like Julia Fox is that oftentimes these other celebrity models, people don't necessarily have as high as expectations for them if they're not speaking out about social issues in the same way that Julia is. And I think that's the reason that she has faced so much backlash for being a supporter of Alexander Wang, and it's just hypocritical. I think to me, it's also not surprising that the fashion industry continues to support and celebrate people regardless of the fact they have these allegations. Anna Wintour, who is the editor-in-chief of American Vogue, also sat front row at Alexander Wang's latest show, which I think really proves to me that the mainstream fashion industry has really moved on, and that any sort of critique and accountability they wanted to hold for Wang has sort of just diminished. For those of you who aren't familiar with the situation, I will give you a little overview. Of course, this is going to be a trigger warning for discussions of sexual assault. Alexander Wang started to face sexual assault allegations on December 9th, 2020, when a very long list of allegations came forward by an account called Shit Model Management. The post compiled over 11 accounts of sexual assault by Alexander Wang against male and transgender models. A video was first posted by the model Owen Mooney recalling being groped by a famous fashion designer, and many began to put the pieces together and figure out that this designer was in fact Alexander Wang. Following this video, 11 other people came forward recalling stories of being roofied by Wang and later sexually assaulted, groped, or touched inappropriately at clubs or social events, or being coerced into sexual activity in exchange for modeling jobs. One of the sickest parts that I find about this whole situation was a lot of people came out and basically said that this had been something that was happening for years and it was sort of swept under the rug by the entire fashion industry. He had a large circle of friends that included celebrities such as Zoe Kravitz. He was known for his party animal image and his lavish fashion week after parties. It seems like there were a lot of people who were aware of this situation before it sort of all came to light super publicly, but they just weren't willing to speak out or do anything. In January of 2021, Alexander Wang stated that the claims were false, fabricated, and mostly anonymous, adding that these baseless allegations were started on social media by sites which repeatedly discarded the value and importance of fact-checking. The allegations were originally posted by the Instagram account Shit Model Management, but later ended up on Diet Prada. I know that a lot of people in the industry have mixed beliefs on Diet Prada. They've sort of become a page for a lot of celebrity and fashion industry gossip. And while I will say that maybe not everything that ends up on there is 100% true, that doesn't mean that just because something was posted on Diet Prada, it's immediately just gossip, and it's not true. I think if over 10 people are coming forward with similar stories, these allegations obviously are not baseless, and I can't imagine the amount of courage someone would have to come forward, and what going through that and not feeling like your voice is heard. I can't imagine what that would be like. After Alexander Wang originally denied the claims, more people came forward claiming similar stories. In March of 2021, Alexander Wang released a statement saying, and I quote, "A number of individuals have come forward recently to raise claims against me regarding my past personal behavior. I support their right to come forward, and I listened carefully to what they had to say. It's not easy for them to share their stories, and I regret acting in a way that has caused them pain. While we disagree on some of the details of these personal interactions, I will set a better example and use my visibility and influence to encourage others to recognize harmful behaviors. Life is about learning and growth, and now that I know better, I will do better. Alex." In 2021, Wang also met with 11 of his accusers. Civil rights lawyer Lisa Bloom represented 11 of the victims against Wang. Bloom denied commenting when asked whether the victims were given a financial settlement. And while this hasn't been proven, there has been a lot of talks in the industry that a lot of Wang's victims were paid off to prevent them from speaking up further about their negative experiences with the designer. Well, obviously, if you're paid off, it's not something that you can openly discuss. I think it makes a lot of sense because of how vocal these people were willing to be and how sort of now these allegations have kind of been swept away. In 2021, Alexander Wang shifted his focus to reviving his label. The brand received funding from outside investors and shifted its focus to the Chinese market, which has been somewhat successful. According to the Business of Fashion, Alexander Wang had 200 million USD in sales in the year 2022. For the past few seasons, there's been a huge influx of celebrities, musicians, and influencers walking the runway. Celebrity models have been popular since the 1980s, but for the past few seasons, we have seen more and more celebrities popping up on the runway. Dolce & Gabbana's fall 2017 show included Madison Beer, Sophia Richie, Delilah Hamlin, and fashion blogger Amy Song. This trend has become even more popular in the past few seasons, with Gabriette walking for Diesel, Dua Lipa and Paris Hilton at Versace, Christine Quinn and Kim Kardashian walking for Balenciaga, Elle Fanning at Miu Miu, Miley Cyrus at Marc Jacobs, Demi Moore at Fendi, Jared Leto at Gucci, Arca, Dominique Jackson, and Ziwei at Mugler, Brenda Hashtag walking for Peter Doe, Aaliyah and Rico Nasty walking for Moalola, and Ethel Kane at Miu Miu. I personally find this whole phenomenon quite interesting. It's definitely nothing new, but I think it's becoming even more prominent on the runways that we've seen for the past few seasons. Part of me wants to think it's a bit of a publicity stunt, especially when they're using really big celebrities like Kim Kardashian, but I also think it can provide for a good opportunity for more diversity on the runway. Unfortunately, also a lot of the celebrities that have been chosen to walk these shows mirror the lack of diversity that we see in the traditional modeling world, in the fact that most of them are thin, white, and able-bodied. Another hot topic that has been discussed from this season's runway is recession-core. As I'm sure everyone knows, we are currently in a recession, and obviously the political events and social issues of the time do tend to play a big role in the fashion world and what people are designing. Many people have picked up on the fact that a lot of celebrities have worn less jewelry and accessories on red carpets, and a lot of the silhouettes that we're seeing on the runway are less flashy, they're more neutral with more of a focus on tailoring and construction. I think first of all, as a lot of people have pointed out, that in times of recession, it's sort of less socially acceptable to wear anything that's super blingy and sort of have these outward displays of wealth, like a big bag with a logo on it or a giant diamond necklace. I think also we're seeing a lot of sort of embellishments on dresses that we're seeing on the red carpet, maybe multiple types of fabric or a lot of layering. So it would sort of be too much to pair a super blingy necklace with a garment that's already more complex. Also, I think fashion, because we have such a high accelerating trend cycle and the trends change every few years. I remember back in 2020 when the COVID pandemic had first started and everyone wanted to wear super bright colors. We were super inspired by the Y2K aesthetic. Everything was very bright because it was kind of a very sad and depressing time. I think because that was so popular now 3 years ago, people are sort of rejecting that whole trend and people want to do the exact opposite. kind of like how a few years ago the thing was to have like the really small mini bags. Like we saw that Jacquemus bag that was just so tiny. The whole joke was you can't even fit anything in it. But now I think we're seeing the comeback of really big bags like the Balenciaga City bag and other oversized bags. I remember last season's Louis Vuitton show, I think it was last season. We saw these like giant, oversized, almost cartoonish looking bags, which provides a really stark contrast to the tiny mini bags we are seeing. I think also because the trends have sort of moved away from like Y2K, super blingy, super fun. A lot of the current fashion that we're seeing on the runway features a more muted color palette with less patterns and embellishment, with more focus on tailoring and craftsmanship. You can definitely see that if you look at sort of like the it brands right now, like I would say Loewe or Bottega Veneta, they definitely focus a lot more on higher quality, well-made garments and construction rather than things that are super bright, flashy, and blingy. Now on to one of this season's most anticipated shows, which was Daniel Lee's premiere as the creative director of Burberry. British designer Daniel Lee graduated from Central St. Martin's and worked for Balenciaga, Donna Karan, before earning the position of ready-to-wear director at Celine under Phoebe Philo. Phoebe Philo was one of the most popular and influential designers of the 2010s, and her departure from Celine in 2018 definitely left a huge gap in the industry. Lee was hired as the creative director of Bottega Veneta to sort of fill that gap for sort of super simple, wearable designs. I think what people also really loved about Phoebe Philo is she really understood what people wanted to wear more on a day-to-day basis, and she made really stylish, practical clothing. Daniel Lee was hired as the creative director of Bottega Veneta in 2018 and presented his first collection in 2019. Daniel Lee's Bottega was super commercially successful, and he was credited for revitalizing the brand. During Lee's time at Bottega Veneta, the brand controversially held a party at Berlin's Soho House. During this time, Germany was in a super strict lockdown due to the COVID pandemic, and Bottega Veneta received a lot of backlash after this decision. In late 2021, it was announced that through a joint decision, Daniel Lee would no longer be the creative director of Bottega Veneta. In 2022, Daniel Lee was appointed creative director of Burberry. Prior to Lee, the creative director of Burberry was Riccardo Tisci, who previously designed for Givenchy in the 2010s. Tisci's designs at Givenchy were super popular, and many thought that he would revitalize the Burberry. Despite his prior success, his designs for Burberry were not commercially successful, and he left the house after only a few seasons. Prior to Daniel Lee's first show, the brand unveiled a new Burberry logo and branding in his latest campaign, which had a really positive response. The campaign was really light and airy, and also brought back the heritage Burberry logo, which had been missing from the branding for some time. Daniel Lee showed his first show for Burberry on February 20th, 2023. Overall, I thought the show was good. It wasn't amazing, and you could tell that he definitely wasn't taking risks. But I feel like that's a bit common when a new creative director comes into a brand. I think that was sort of similar to the overall consensus from critics and the industry. The show used a lot of color as well as bringing back the heritage Burberry Novacek pattern. Overall, I think the show was good, but I kind of agree with many critics when they described the show as underwhelming. Another collection that people were definitely looking forward to was Gucci's first men's and women's wear collection after the departure of Alessandro Michele. Alessandro was really popular for his super maximalist and crazy designs at Gucci, and his designs were super commercially successful. I remember in the mid to late 2010s, Gucci was definitely the it brand. The pieces that we saw in the collections this season were definitely a lot more muted and subdued to the Gucci that we've seen for the past few years. It was also a bit incohesive. You could definitely tell that there was no one creative director. A lot of the pieces themselves were really great, but the collection as a whole didn't necessarily flow, and you couldn't necessarily pinpoint that all the pieces were from the same collection. I think the most notable thing about this collection was the revival of the Tom Ford era horsebit clutch. This clutch was last seen on the runway in the early 2000s, I believe in 2004. It's super popular on the resale market these days. It resells for an average of $2,000 to $7,000, but I've seen some go for as high as $12,000. I think it's super interesting how a lot of brands are choosing to sort of revitalize old styles. I think it's nothing new to sort of reference old brand codes and past collections, but I think this is something that we've seen even more and more over the past few collections. I remember back in 2020 when Prada released the Re-Edition 2000 bag of their nylon shoulder bag that was super popular, Jean Paul Gaultier's Cyber collection, and the revitalization of the Dior saddlebag. I almost wonder how much the rise in the resale industry has sort of played into the revival of older collections and old iconic bags and silhouettes. The resale industry has obviously blown up in the past 10 years and just absolutely exploded in the past 5. And I think more and more people are choosing to buy vintage. But it's clear that these brands are really paying attention to the fact that people are really into sort of these old designs and choosing to revitalize these styles for the new era. The show that I have probably been anticipating the most is Ludovic de Saint Sernin's premiere as the creative director of Ann Demeulemeester. This is one of my favorite brands. I'm obviously a bit biased. Ludovic de Saint Sernin was appointed as creative director of Ann Demeulemeester on December 1st, 2022. The role has remained vacant since Sébastien Meunier left the house in 2020. Meunier led the brand after Demeulemeester's departure in 2010, after working for MM6 and Martin Margiela's menswear in the 2000s. I really personally liked this collection for a number of reasons. I really liked how it blended aesthetics used by Ann Demeulemeester as well as aesthetics that Ludovic de Saint Sernin uses in his own label. I know that this collection and the appointment of Saint Sernin was definitely met with a lot of negative criticism. I think Ann Demeulemeester has such a cult following that a lot of people are going to be super critical of anyone who comes into the role of creative director. I think that Ludovic was definitely appointed to the creative director role because of his focus on youthful design. I'm definitely super excited to see what he does next, and I hope that he'll bring sort of a younger, fresher audience to the brand. Ultimately, as much as people would want someone else as creative director, fashion houses do need to make money, and I think that this is ultimately a smart choice for the brands.